What we're going to discuss are the end user capabilities of customizing your graphic user interface. There's a couple things that can be done to make changes that might make it more productive for you in the long run. Now, I have to say a disclaimer. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about, you may not be able to do, number one. Some of the things I'm going to talk about may not be within the policies of your IT security structure. Now, quite frankly, being an IT person myself, if you have the ability to make the change, then it should be within your policies. So I'll show you some things that you can change to make things a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more productive, etc. A lot of these are spread across multiples of our courseware in I Get It. And I've just collected them together, and with one, there's a couple of addendums to that actually aren't in the courseware, but it's a very, very productive thing for you to be aware of. So we're going to talk about customizing in terms of placing, modifying, and customizing toolbars, so you can actually have toolbars that cross workbenches, toolbars that have something from part design and something from generative shape design, for example. Modifying the graphic user interface presentation, how it appears on your screen, etc. And using the left mouse button only for geometry manipulation. Now, the ultimate with CATIA V5, actually with just about any CAD product, is a spaceball, whereby you can put your non-dominant hand to work manipulating the geometry. I haven't seen a lot of those lately, so it seems to be falling out of favor. Then the next most predominant use is a 3-button mouse, but occasionally you may have the opportunity to use a piece of equipment that only has a 2-button mouse. There are ways to adjust to that, but the simplest way is for me to show you how to totally eliminate mouse button 2 and mouse button 3 in your manipulations. So let's get started. I'm going to initialize as if I had just installed it, my CATIA session. There's that darn splash screen that comes up right in the middle of when I'm reading my email, and it stays on top and I can't click and see my email behind it, etc., etc. You may or may not see this Welcome to CATIA V5. Those workbenches that are presented on that dialog are a function of the license that you have. It opens automatically a product document, an assembly document. Let me close this dialog, and in that context, if I say, all right, I want to go to part design, theoretically, it should open up a part design document. It should open up a CAT part, but when I select part design, it actually puts that part beneath the product level of the default assembly. And if I open this up, click an empty space to unselect the product level, I see that I'm actually active in a part, and I have the part design workbench over here that I'm currently using. So basically it is having you do a top-down type of design in an assembly context by default. If I come back up here and say part design again, then I get the normal things that I'm accustomed to seeing in terms of opening up a new CAT part document. So number one, that splash screen. Let's get rid of that. Now, these used to be called secret environment variables. When you initialize CATIA, what happens is it reads a file that has all of the variables in it that are important to CATIA. Then when you make changes, those changes are annotated in what's called CAT settings files. So you have a group of files that actually remember the modifications that you made. So the environment that's created by default is for anybody that's logged into this machine, the settings that you change, the CAT settings document that for each individual login. So if you have 3 shifts, you have 3 logins, they can all be different. Okay, so we'll see how to manage that. Now, these used to be called secret environment variables because Dassault didn't really want you to use them. Well, they're all over the web now, so it's not difficult to find these. So let's see how we can make modifications that are going to be a little bit productive in terms of that. There's 2 ways you can get to them, get to your environment variables. You can right-click on computer and say properties, or you can select control panel, say system, advanced system settings, and environment variables. The environment variables are 3 varieties. Variety number 1 is system variables, the ruler variables. Okay, these will take precedence over the others. There are user environment variables. And then, and let me show you how to find out what environment variables you have set. If you go to the Start menu, search for programs and type CMD, that's the DOS prompt window, and simply type in and hit enter, type in set, it will show you all of the variables that are currently active on your machine. Now, I say currently active for a very specific reason. If you look closely at these, and you don't need to do that, there's nothing here except for these last 4 that have any indication that it is related to CATIA V5. When you start CATIA V5, the actual product is cnext, or the actual executable is cnext.exe, and that will read the environment file and set up a whole bunch of other parameters. In other words, environment variables that are used to say, here's where all the parts and pieces of CATIA are, and those environment variables are then used in the code to go find those pieces. Well, you can put these variables that we're going to talk about into that particular file, but most of you probably do not have access to do that. So you can set up what is called variables for your user ID, user variables or user environment variables. The one that we're going to deal with first, I'm going to edit the cnext splash screen. Remember, cnext is the name of the executable. And I just have put an underscore character at the beginning so that they become inactive. Say OK to that. And now I'm going to restart CATIA. And notice that the splash screen still comes up. So you have to make sure that you're going to OK out of this dialog. And I always do OK back to this level, then restart CATIA, and no splash screen will appear. So that was cnext splash screen with a value of no. We'll take a look at the other ones here, so bear with me. This dialog shows up because of the licensing. Down here is a click box that says do not show this dialog at startup. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I still don't like the fact that I've got this product coming up. I have bad eyes, so I might have a little bit of trouble once I start really doing a lot of work in here, reading the sizing on the specification tree. So there's a couple different things we can do here to affect that. Let me exit out of here again, go back to my environment variables, user environment variables, and I've got a cat graph size. What that means is this will control the default font size for the specification tree. Let's edit that. I'm going to take the underscore off. So it would be, if you wanted to use this, you would put in a user environment variable of cat graph size with a value of 12. OK, OK, start CATIA. And you'll notice, by the way, and you probably notice this every morning, that it takes a little while for CATIA to come up. One of the reasons for that is what it does during initialization. So you can see that my specification tree has been enlarged. That's the largest it can go, 12-point font size. And I have a product document open, but in the way that I operate, I don't like to have product documents as my main working environment. I'd like to just come up without any document at all, and I'm going to open up the particular workbench that I'm going to be working in, and therefore I'm going to have a CAT part document for my part design and my generative shape design workbenches that I work with, and I'm going to have a CAT product when I finally do all of the parts and bring them up with bottom-up design into my assembly. So bring my parts into the assembly, do the constraining, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get out of here one more time. Actually, it's going to be 2 more times. Go back to my environment variable settings, and I have a variable called cat no start document. No spaces in any of these, obviously. And say, yes, I don't want that start document. Say, okay. Okay again. Start CATIA. And now when CATIA initializes, I'm going to get that background screen, that Galaxy background screen. It's going to come up more quickly because, and I don't know why, particularly on the first initialization in the morning, it takes quite a bit of time for it to bring up the interface. And a good part of that is bringing up that first CAD product document. Don't know why. So therefore, if we eliminate that, we don't have to worry about it. Now, I do a lot of work remotely. Therefore, I don't want to put a lot of extra graphics across the web. So therefore, this Galaxy image is of no value to me. It's a pretty picture, but it's of no value to me. So let me, this will be my last environment variable change. Go back in once again, and I have a variable called CNext background, and I just say no to that. So I'm going to take the underscore off of here, say okay, okay. Now I'm going to okay out of here also and close the interface that I used to get to here. Start my CATIA session one last time. It will come up in the morning a little bit more quickly, and it will come up every iteration beyond that a little bit more quickly. And you see that I have a gray background. I have no product document, and I'm in the CATIA V5 graphic user interface. I just maximize that so we can see everything. And I'm going to go to Start, and here's all these guys that were presented to me as a result of the license that I am currently using. Well, I don't need all those. I do assembly design, I do part design, and I do generative shape design, and that's all that I do. So if I go to Tools, Customize, the first dialog shows me on the left-hand side all of the available workbenches based on my license. And on the right-hand side, the favorites. Well, the favorites is that initial dialog that we saw, that we said, don't show that to me again. And it is also the first section of that start menu. I could take all of these off of here, and then they would not show, nothing would show up here. There wouldn't be another section on the start menu in the upper left. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ones off of here that I don't use. In your context, you may be, and Sketcher is always embedded within the other products, it may be that you're using the ability to add to this list. So the left pointing arrow, take it off the favorites list. The right pointing arrow is add to it. So just keep that in mind if you're going to set this up for yourself. So I don't use all these other things. I only use 3 workbenches during my day. And wireframe and surface is really a subset of generative shape design. Say close to that, and now my start menu has those 3 items on it. So instead of going to mechanical design, part design, assembly design, and generative shape design, oh, he left wireframe and surface there. Under shape, generative shape design, I have the 3 selectable here. I'm going to start part design. I don't happen to like this display. You may or may not. So I'm going to maximize this, and this graduated background just doesn't do anything for me. It gives me, you know, no real impact as far as productivity, etc. So in Tools Options is where you go to change most of your settings. When you change a setting, one of two things will happen immediately. One is nothing will happen as far as dialogues coming up, and number two, a dialogue will come up that says you have to restart. So 90% of the time, the ones that require a restart will put that dialogue up, but it's not 100%. Therefore, if you don't see the dialogue and it doesn't appear to have taken effect, shut down CATIA and restart it. Now, let's talk a second about shutting down CATIA and being nice to your comrades on the floor. Basically, the shutdown of the product to reinitialize it, under the Start menu, there is an exit. Under the File menu, there is an exit, and you have the X click in the upper right-hand corner. Forget the X click in the upper right-hand corner. And let me tell you why. There's a secret that's going on behind the scenes here. When you grab a license, when you're initialized in CATIA, that license is held, and a timer goes off right away. That license is held for 17 minutes. So let's say you're working for 4 hours, and then you decide to use the X click in the upper right-hand corner. What happens is you don't know where in that 17-minute interval you actually are. So therefore, if you're using a license that somebody else needs, let's say you're using a shareable license in this particular instance, then that license could be held for 17 minutes until that timer runs out. At the time the timer runs out, then your CATIA session says, hey, do I still have my license? And if it's not there, I'm sorry, other way. The license server says, hey, do you still need your license? And if there's no response, it will then release the license. Now, being nice to your coworkers, exit here and exit here will actually release the license at exit time. So you don't have to worry about that interval delay. Back to Tools Options. If we go to Display and go to Visualization, here are the colors that are used. I strongly recommend, until you are very experienced with the product, that you not change the primary colors, and I'll show you a couple of reasons why. But if you click off this graduated color background and say OK, now you have a nice solid background. This is also a much better way to do it if you are presenting over the web or you're transmitting whatever, or creating videos or taking snapshots, whatever the case may be, because it just has a nicer effect. Sometimes with that graduated background, depending on the resolution of what you're doing, you can get some striping effect. So this way it's a solid background, no worries. Let's come back to that. And here's one of the reasons that you want to be careful about what you're doing with these colors. Let me cancel out here again. I've got white lettering. I've got white as the default for my X, Y, Y, Z, ZX planes, and I've got white outlines on my compass in the upper right, and my axis in the lower right, I have X, Y, Z in white also, or I have the whole thing in white. Let's go to Tools Options. One of the things that I do like is changing the background to a color of white. Say OK, and now I have a white background. But guess what? It changed it reversed from white to black the text in the specification tree. It reversed from white to black the axis system in the lower right, but it did not change the edge outline of the compass, if you happen to use that. And in addition to that, it did not change the colors for the X, Y, Y, Z, ZX planes. So I don't know why this is true. This has been many releases that this has remained to be true. And I think what they should do is take all white objects and make them black when you make a white background. Now, you can go in and change all of those things, but it's a fairly laborious thing to do. So let's go back to Tools Options and put this back to where it was. Well, you know what? I'm not sure if this is the right color or whatever. You have a tool in Tools Options that allows you to reset the parameter values to the default ones. Now, first of all, see these gray padlocks? That means you have a CATIA administrator who's been here. They're either gray unlocked padlocks or they're red locked padlocks. If they're red, you are not allowed to change them. If they are gray, you're allowed to change them. So if you get to this background color and this is a red padlock, you wouldn't be able to make it white anyway. Now, in this case, I'm not sure what color was used, or let's say I've made a whole bunch of changes and I've been playing around with this thing and it's kind of where I want it to be, but not really. So what you want to do is come to this tool, select it, and it will give you a dialog for reset that say, all right, do you want to reset all the options on this tab page? In other words, this tab page. These are the tabs. So if I made a performance change or a navigation change, it would not take effect. For the selected workbench, part design in this case, for the selected solution only, in other words, a broader scope, for the selected solution and its associated workbenches, so it would be multiple workbenches, or for all tab pages, in other words, reset all of your settings. I'm just going to do, for this tab page only, say yes, and now I've got my graduated background back. I've got the color that I want, the default color. I'm going to turn graduated background off and say OK, and there's my Tools Options settings taking effect. Now, remember I said that you have settings for your session, and anybody else that logs in has settings for their session. Let's say you're traveling to another location, and it would be really handy if you had the ability to take all of your settings with you, because they're just, you basically get accustomed to muscle memory, and the cursor kind of is moving itself, and you're not even paying attention because it's going to where the next tool is, etc. And it would make it easier if you had the ability to actually take your settings with you. Well, you actually do. This second tool down here says dump parameters values. What it allows you to do is create a directory or a file that contains all of this. Actually, it's a directory that contains all of these. You can put that on a thumb drive, hand it to the CATIA administrator at the other end and say, wherever I'm going to be logged in, please activate these values. And it's unfortunately, it's a command line thing that has to be run. But the CATIA administrator is going to know how to do that, and therefore you have all of your settings in the new location. So we've made that change. Now, let's look at a couple other things in terms of appearance, etc. I need to move my go to webinar dialog out of the way here a little bit. And I'm going to do a sketch on that plane. And I always keep it simple, so I'm just going to do that circular sketch and exit out of Sketcher and create a solid. Put a hole on that. And I'm going to go right on this surface and make a relatively small hole, say OK. And let's zoom in a little bit here on this very simple image that we've created. And you'll notice, and I'm sure you've noticed this if you don't know how to change these settings, that should be a circle last time I checked. That has a radius value, okay? That kind of passed by us here. But it's actually an entagon. Well, those are called chord lengths. And if you keep a chord length too long, then you get this ragged edged effect. If you go to Tools Options, go to Display on the left-hand side, go to Performance. You have a value of 0.2 and a value of 0.02 for 3D performance accuracy and 2D. Don't know why they haven't changed this default value. The reason that it is so high and it gives you this chordal effect, the higher it gets, the bigger the chords get, and it looks like an entagon rather than an actual circle. Keep in mind that computers don't do circles. They do little small line segments that are arranged so that they look like circles. So if I drop this down as far down as I can take it, it's going to go down to a value of 0.01. I actually dropped this one down also so that I have the maximum visual accuracy for the things that I'm presenting. While you're here, if you have large assemblies that you deal with and you actually load the entire assembly, there's an option here called occlusion culling enabled. If you have an automobile, an entire automobile in an assembly in your session, and you rotate it with this option turned off, everything that you can't see, in other words, the engine under the hood, all of the framework within the vehicle, all of the objects that are the wheels, etc., that are not currently visible based on your perspective on that assembly, they're all recalculated. Well, that's kind of silly. I don't know why they haven't changed this default either. Occlusion culling says, if I can't see it, don't recalculate it. So basically, it gives you much quicker manipulation of large assemblies. Down here are two other options that you can play with: level of detail when it's static and while it's moving, and pixel culling, in other words, getting rid of pixels that can't be seen while it's static and while it's moving. In other words, when you rotate it, it's going to use these values. When it's stopped, it's going to use these values. The default values here are fine, but what you can do is change these values a little bit to slightly adjust your, to get rid of any jerkiness that you have when you're manipulating a very large assembly. I say okay to that. Oh, look at that. I've got a circle. It is no longer an entagon. So that's one of the primary things that you want to make a change to. When you change something that is going to make a change to your settings, those changes are only documented when you exit. So the recommendation that I always give, I'm also a CATIA instructor. I wear a whole bunch of different hats. Let's not worry about all of them. But one of the recommendations that I give is when you are given a new CATIA workstation that's vanilla settings, go in and make all the changes the way you want them and then exit out of the product. So for example, I always recommend that the standard toolbar that you drag up here to the top and start a new toolbar area, and the same for the view. Pardon my graphics here. I have an older graphics adapter driver that's giving some echo effect there. When you first open up a session, if you look at the end of the toolbar area, so if we look over here on the right where my magnifier is, I have what's called a chevron, and you might see that here also. So any place where you actually have toolbars that exceed the space available in that particular toolbar area, you are going to have that effect to say, excuse me, you have more stuff down here that you can't see. So obviously the first thing that you want to do is you want to drag these things up and place them someplace where you're creating secondary items. Now, here's another little secret that few people don't realize, pardon the echoes. If you are dragging a toolbar, that's what I did there to create those echoes, and you hold down the shift key and release it, it will change the orientation from vertical to horizontal or vice versa. Now, if you drag it into a toolbar area, it's going to do that automatically when it places it. But you want to get these things all arranged the way you like them. One thing that people tend to forget is you can put these on all four edges of the screen. So you can actually align the toolbars over here on the left edge also. When you're finished doing that on all the workbenches that you're going to be working on, exit the product, and that will document all of the changes that you made in the CAD settings, and then re-enter the product. That way you have everything documented, remembering that you can take these settings along if you elect to do so. One little side note, if you're going to send an assembly to somebody, always, if you're going to send an assembly or actually a CAD product to any external destination, always use send to. What happens is, and it depends on whether you're in a PDM system or not, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of variables here that I won't get into. But when you are getting ready to send something to somebody else, if you bring it in and save it, use save management to save it to another location, what you're doing is you're changing your location for that. Whereas send to will take everything, put it into a directory, or if you have an appropriate interface, allow you to put it directly into an email that can be sent to another user. That other user then, and let me show you one other aspect of tools options that might come into play here. If I go to general and go to document, I have linked document localization. Don't worry about what the name means. Here's the thing you want to look for if you seem to be having trouble with assemblies that were sent to you. You have folder of link. That's the pointer that's in the assembly document to where all of the subordinate documents are located. You also have, in the same context, folder of pointing document. Make sure both of those are changed to yes. What that means is if you bring an assembly in and it has pointers to the X drive and the Z drive and the Y drive, you open it and it says, hey, I can't find this stuff if this is a no. If you have this set to yes, folder of pointing document, in other words, I opened this out of from my desktop and all the other documents are there. If this is set to no, it won't find the other documents. If it's set to yes, it will find the other documents. So basically get everything set up that way. Let me zoom out here a little bit. And now you discover, oh my gosh, I'm traveling with a laptop that I'm not familiar with, and I don't have the ability to do this kind of manipulation because there's no middle mouse button. I won't get into how to adjust to that particular object, but you have some other options that you can use that only require the left mouse button. Again, if you go to Tools Options and go to Parameters and Measures, Devices and Virtual Reality, select Tablet Support. You have a transformation pad, and I'm going to show you this. Few people use it, just so you know it's there. It's kind of fun and kind of funky. Activate the transformation pad. I'm going to put that on the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to let the lower left of the screen be the gesture pad. Let me show you the gesture pad settings. Basically, if you gesture making these shapes, then you can use the gesture pad instead of doing right-click copy, for example, or undo or cut, etc. So you have some other options. Again, not many people use it, but just in case you ever run across it, I wanted you to see it. And then on this one, I can open up the options panel when I set it up. I can center rotation, reframe, or take no action at all. Everybody leaves this set to the option panel. I'll show you why. Say OK, and now we have two new areas of display here. This is the transformation pad. This is the gesture pad. So let's say, let me do an insert geometrical set. And let me put it into part one. Let's do it that way. And now I've got geometrical set 3. I don't want that geometrical set, so if I select it And I'm going to use the gesture for cut. So I'm going to go from the right to the left. It's going to highlight in red to say got it, and it's going to do that operation. And you can change those operations. If I double click on it, I have no option settings that I can go to from here. But if you go back to Tools Options, you can set any command that you want to perform anything that you want. This is the transformation pad. Rotate, pan, zoom. So in zoom, you left mouse click, you zoom in and out. Next, you go to pan, you click left mouse click and zoom back and forth. And next is rotate. No virtual globe showing up, and you simply do the rotate operation. By the way, if you are doing some kind of a presentation whereby you would like to not have all of the visual litter here, you can actually go to the edit menu, the view menu, drop down to the bottom, and you can do full screen. So there you have everything that's in the graphic area being presented, but all of the other stuff is not, which are going to be distractions to the, the vice president, whoever you're presenting to. And then you simply right click in the empty screen area and turn full screen off, and it comes back to your normal settings. Okay. Under Tools, we have Tools Options and we have Tools Customize. Let's go to Customize. Here's where we did the Start menu and parsed it down to only the 3 that you use. And using this particular option, you have the ability to do a user-defined workbench, a user-defined toolbar or set of toolbars, and those toolbars contain user-defined commands. Now, a secret of CATIA V5. Part design isn't part design. It's kind of a ghost workbench. What happens is particular commands apply to particular document types. So a CAT part document can be operated on, which you already know, can be operated on by part design or generative shape design. Well, let's say you're doing a lot of work where you're just flip-flopping back and forth constantly between part design and generative shape design. It's getting a little bit cumbersome, and if you really think about it, you're wasting your time flip-flopping back and forth. Let me show you 2 options, 2 things that most people are unaware of. Right here, if you watch down here, I have right below my cursor, I have C:, and let me do this one over here, C:, instantiate from document. Instantiate from document is the name of the command. So if I go and sit on that scaling command, and again, look to the left, it's called the power input area. Look to the left of that, C:, means command, and then the name of the command. So you can go through any workbench and see all of the names of all of the commands that might be of interest to you. Come back to Tools Customize. Let's create my own toolbar. So I say New, and you simply give it a name. I'm always very generic about my naming conventions. So it's my toolbar. Watch roughly in the middle of the screen when I say OK, and this guy pops up. That's my toolbar. So I created that toolbar, and I can put on it any commands that I want. So let's go to Commands. If you drop down on the left-hand pane and select All Commands, it will show you all of the commands in the right-hand pane. I'm going to select and say, all right, let's find Sketcher. I'm going to select something, type an S, and that's all. It goes down to S. It doesn't use multiple characters, unfortunately, so we have to zoom down to where Sketcher is located, because I know I do a lot of things with Sketcher. So I'm going to do Sketch, and you simply left mouse click and drag and drop it onto the toolbar, and there's my Sketch tool on the toolbar. Let me see, I use part design a lot. So let's type a P and go down to pad, left mouse click, drag, and now I've got the pad tool. I want to reorganize these. I just simply do the drag right within the context of the toolbar. Now what we want to do is we want to do, let's say, an extrude for generative shape design. So I go to ease and look for extrude, drag it, place it on the toolbar. There's my extrude on the toolbar, and let's say I do a lot of offsetting. So I go to the O's, pick up offset, drag that onto the toolbar. If I could get it on the toolbar. And therefore we have a set of tools on this toolbar, and if I right click in the workbench area, I see that I have now a my toolbar. So if I left mouse click to get rid of it, it operates the same as every other toolbar. So I can place it in the location where I want to have it located. And if I X click it, same as any other toolbar, I have to go turn it back on. Now, if I do an extrude, remember that I'm in part design. So if you look in the upper right here, I'm in the part design toolbar workbench. But when I select this, it'll actually give me the command that is only available on the generative shape design workbench. Therefore, the tools, the actual executables, are not associated with a workbench. The workbench, rather, is nothing more than a reorganization of the commands available based on the generic solution that it's addressing. So part design has tools on it that are going to create solid material, essentially, effectively. Generative shape design is going to have tools on it that are going to create wireframe and surface elements. But there's no reason why you can't combine them. So if you find yourself moving back and forth constantly, you can create your own toolbar. You can also, and let me go to Tools Customize again. And let me just create another generically named toolbar. Here's something else that you can do. Normally people would not do this. I'm just going to let the name remain the same. There's my second toolbar. And if I want to create a set of tools that are on, these are not workbench oriented tools, I can actually come here and let me see, new document. I can actually drag it and drop it onto that, and it disappears from the standard toolbar. Here's my open. Let me put the open on here also. So I'm modifying the existing ones. So I go hog wild one day and not thinking about it and all the ramifications of it, and I say, well, gee, you know, I kind of messed things up here. I have my standard and my view toolbars. I've modified things and moved them around. What you have the ability to do is on the customize, you can say restore all contents. You can say restore contents. So you can actually restore all of your contents. Watch my standard toolbar in the upper left, say OK, and suddenly they will reappear. So I can actually modify things to actually have a more of a direct effect. Restore all contents, restore positions. I want to put them back to their original positions. I can do restore positions, etc. So that's the Tools Customize. User workbenches, you can create a workbench. We did not do that, but you can create a workbench that has all kinds of toolbars on it that are of your liking. Toolbars, commands. Commands will show you a certain subset, but the very last item is all commands, and you will have access to all the commands available. Last but not least is options. I have large icons here. I can reduce the size of that if I want to buy back some geometry space. I can do an icon ratio where I use a value to increase the size. Tooltips, everybody leaves them turned on so that when you park on something, down at the bottom you see isometric view. That's a tool tip. What language am I using? Overbearing CATIA administrators will sometimes turn on lock toolbar position. What that does is once everything is organized, and it may be that the heavy-handed administrator has already done this for you, it will lock those into position so you cannot make any changes. If I say lock, say close, and try to move these, I can't move them. I grab the grip handle, I can't do anything with them because they have been locked into position.